Welcome to Heartbreak Chronicles. Nights on the North Sea rig Odin's eye are defined by the murmur of steel, the whistling of the sea breeze, and the regular beeping of instruments. As the safety director of this steel behemoth, Liam's world consists of data, protocols, and never-ending vigilance. A 15-year career has allowed him to anticipate a potential disaster from the slightest fluctuation in a pressure gauge reading. His hands were covered with calluses, but his eyes were clear and sharp, as if they could penetrate the fog of the sea and look straight into the abyss. Tonight, the penultimate night of his 3-month shift, in 36 hours he would be boarding a helicopter back to Aberdeen, Scotland, and returning to the quiet home on the outskirts of the city that he had traded countless days and nights of dancing with risk for. He had just finished reviewing a full platform pipeline pressure test to ensure that every valve and every inch of weld was within the safety threshold. In his head, he was contemplating a gift for his daughter Zoe. The girl who had just turned 16 was hooked on astronomy, and he had ordered a professional-grade telescope to surprise her with. As for his wife, Clara, he only hoped that his warm embrace would soothe her furrowed brow. The last few times they've spoken, Clara has always seemed preoccupied, and he blames her mother's deteriorating condition and the bottomless pit of medical bills. He sends home more than 2/3 of his paycheck every month, but he knows that money is no substitute for companionship. Liam, the voice of the control room supervisor, came over the intercom. The comm room has your emergency encrypted line from shore. Liam's brow tightened imperceptibly. Emergency encrypted lines? This is usually only activated for the highest level of family emergencies, such as when a family member is critically ill. He and Clara have regular satellite airtime and never use that channel. A sense of foreboding crept over his ankles like cold seawater. He walked briskly through the lighted corridor, the cold metal handrail conveying the vibrations of the platform, as did his restless heartbeat at the moment. In the comm room, the duty officer handed him a pair of headphones and gestured for him to sit down. On the screen, an unfamiliar string of encrypted numbers was flashing. He took a deep breath and hit the answer button. There was a cacophony of electricity on the line, followed by a girl's voice, deliberately muffled and trembling almost to the point of no sound, piercing his eardrums like a needle. "Daddy, help us." "It's Zoe." Liam's heart felt as if it was clutched by an invisible hand. "Zoe, it's me." "Slow down, what happened?" He forced his voice to maintain a professional composure, an instinct he had for dealing with unexpected situations. "Mom, that man she brought back, Vincent, him and his gang of friends, they took over our home." Zoe's voice was filled with suppressed fear and despair. "They were everywhere, smoking in the house, messing everything up." "Dad, they said they were going to ambush you at the door when you got back, and they were going to force me to watch with my own eyes." The girl's voice broke from sobbing, each sound like a heavy hammer hitting Liam in the chest. "I yelled at them and said you're going to make them regret it, but they just laughed and they made me do their dishes." The word dishwashing, so everyday, seems more humiliating and harsh than any description of violence at this moment. His daughter, the princess he'd given everything he had to protect, was being used as a servant by a group of invaders in the castle he'd built with his own hands. "Where's your mom?" Liam's voice was as cold as the 10,000-year-old ice beneath the platform. She was with Vincent, Dad. She chose him." In Zoe's tone was the piercing chill of being betrayed by her next of kin far beyond fear. "I heard them talking. Vincent was lying to her. He said he would pay all of Grandma's medical bills, but they were laughing at her in private." "I have to hang up. I hear footsteps. They're coming." "Daddy, come back. I'm scared." The line was rudely cut, leaving only a dead busy signal. Liam sat quietly, the hum of the instruments around him seeming to come from another world. Clara's face kept flashing in his mind. The girl who would argue with him over a philosophical point in the university library. The woman who laughed with tears in her eyes when he clumsily proposed. The wife who held his newborn Zoe and planned the future with him. These warm memories, at the moment, were like countless sharp blades, cutting frantically inside his heart. There were no roars of anger, no outbursts of rage. His anger was a very different form. It had no temperature, yet it was condensing at breakneck speed. It was like a huge iceberg forming in the deep sea, silent, heavy, but containing enough irresistible power to crush everything. He took off his headphones, calmly placed them on his desk, and turned toward the platform manager's office with a frighteningly steady pace. "I need to go offshore immediately." He stood in front of the manager, his tone undeniable, no pleading in his eyes, only irrefutable determination. Extreme family emergency. The platform manager, a seasoned senior citizen, read in Liam's bloodshot but unusually calm eyes that this was no ordinary domestic dispute. Without another question, he immediately picked up the phone and initiated the highest priority emergency evacuation procedure for Liam. By the time the roar of the helicopter's rotor blades sounded over the platform, Liam had changed out of his work clothes. He pulled his cell phone out of his clothes pocket, and on the screen was a picture of him and Zoe from last year's birthday party, in which Zoe was smiling like a carefree little sunbeam. He gently rubbed his daughter's face with his thumb. He closes his eyes, and instead of a cozy picture of his family, he sees Odin's eyes contingency plan, risk assessment matrix, and crisis management flowchart. His brain, that precision instrument accustomed to finding order in chaos and recognizing weakness and danger, had begun to operate at full speed. Vincent and his gang thought they were ambushing an oilman who had returned tired from months away from home. They'll soon realize that they're messing with someone who analyzes and deals with disasters for a living. They thought they were hunters, not realizing that they had locked themselves into one of the deadliest traps ever triggered by their own hands. And the designer of that trap is on his way home. After a 10-hour flight and a long drive, Liam is finally back in the city he knows so well. It was nearing dusk, but instead of going straight home, he parked the nondescript Ford sedan he'd rented in a public parking lot a few blocks from his home. He walked through a quiet street, blending like a ghost into the background of the neighborhood. His house, the small, double-story white building he had traded for countless days and nights spent in the midst of frightening waves, looked like a tarnished stranger at the moment. Beer cans and pizza boxes are strewn across a lawn once manicured like a golf course green, and the second-floor windows are wide open, with smoke and loud music wafting vaguely out. Gone was the hand-sewn Clara banner with the words, "Welcome Home," embroidered on it, replaced by a black t-shirt with a skull and crossbones on it, swaying in the evening breeze like a trophy of occupation. Two strange men were leaning against the railing of the porch he had built with his own hands, smoking, and every now and then a rude laugh escaped. Liam's gaze swept coldly over the unnatural bulge at their waists, a typical feature of an amateur carrying a weapon misplaced, clearly outlined, and full of ignorant arrogance. He took note of their faces, just as he took note of every piece of equipment on the job that was a safety hazard catalog number. The phone vibrated with an address from Marcus. Marcus is one of Liam's few close friends, a former detective in the police force's major crimes unit who started a private investigation firm a few years ago because he was tired of the shackles of the system. Liam contacted him before he boarded the plane and simply said, "I need to know what's going on at my house. All of it." 20 minutes later, Liam walked into a dimly lit neighborhood bar that smelled of stale beer. Marcus sat at the far end of the card table, his trademark red hair much thinner than the last time they met. But those blue eyes were still sharp as a falcon. "You look like shit, man." Marcus opened the door and pushed a glass of whiskey in front of Liam. "Tell me everything you know." Liam sat down without touching the glass of wine, his voice husky. Marcus pushed a thick, craft envelope over. "Your wife's new friend, named Vincent Hayes. A local landlubber inherits one of his old man's crappy bars, then turns it into a den for lending money and dealing contraband. There were some convictions, all minor assault and possession offenses that didn't get him in for long. Lately, though, he and his gang have been getting more and more aggressive and seem to be planning something big." Liam opens the envelope, and inside is a stack of photos and documents. The first is a copy of Vincent's driver's license, a typical villain's face with menacing eyes and a bad scorpion tattoo crawling on his neck. The next few are surveillance photos taken by pinhole cameras. In one of them, Clara and Vincent are walking out of a cheap motel, Vincent's hand resting possessively on her waist, and she, surprisingly, is smiling. It was the smile that once bloomed only for Liam, with a hint of shyness. "How long?" Liam's voice was flat without a ripple, as if he were reading an accident report. Marcus hesitated, seeming to weigh his words. "According to my informant's returns and some credit card charges, their relationship began about 8 months ago." It was shortly after your last sea voyage that Clara started frequenting Vincent's bar. My informant took these pictures 2 months ago. He pointed to another document in the envelope, a bank statement. She's been taking money out of your joint account in larger and larger amounts, 20,000 last month. I looked it up, and her mother's cancer treatment did require a large sum of money for an expensive experimental drug. But the bill and the withdrawal amount don't match. Vincent is good at drilling holes in Clara's weaknesses of fear and desperation. He portrayed himself as a savior and used help with medical bills as bait to drag her down step by step. That doesn't excuse her from bringing criminals into my home and endangering my daughter. Liam's voice can instantly freeze piping hot coffee. Of course you can't. Marcus pulled out a few more snapshots of the characters. These are a few of Vincent's hardcore henchmen, all street thugs and scum fired from the police force. They use your house as a club and a stronghold. But my source says there's more to it than that. They were recently in contact with a real estate company called Shield Construction. This company has a bad reputation and specializes in undercutting properties in old towns using tactics that don't rise to the occasion. Vincent is probably working for them, and your house, with its perfect location, is probably their next target for a new distribution center, or simply to take it by force. Liam stood up and slipped the envelope into the inside pocket of his jacket. Thanks, Marcus. I'll take credit for that favor. Liam, Marcus called out to him, his tone serious. Look, these guys may be rabble-rousers, but they're unconventional and ruthless. Don't go in hard alone. I never go in hard, Liam said as he turned away, leaving a message. I only dismantle systems. He drove around town aimlessly, his mind racing through all the information as if he were building a complex model of the accident. Rationally, he can understand Clara's desperation in the face of her mother's serious illness and enormous financial pressures. But that understanding could not lessen the sting of betrayal. She didn't just cheat. She led the wolf into the house. She put their daughter in incalculable danger, and she personally trampled on everything they had built together. The phone vibrated again, and a video was sent from an unknown number. It's from Marcus, with the message, "Just got it. Be prepared." His thumb hovered over the play button for a moment, a foreboding feeling already in his mind. The video's footage is shaking, and it's obviously a sneak peek. The location was his kitchen. Zoe is at the sink washing a mountain of dishes while one of Vincent's men, one of the two Liam saw on the porch, is leaning over the refrigerator, harassing her with flirty language. Hey, little princess, when that fool of a father of yours gets back, why don't you stay and work for us as a maid, when we'll love you? The man said, reaching for Zoe's hair. Zoe snapped out of the way, tears in her eyes, but stubbornly shot back. My dad will tear all of you scum apart. The man was enraged, grabbed her arm, and said viciously, Your mouth is still hard. We'll educate you properly after we clean up after your father. The video is interrupted here. The phone's casing groaned in Liam's palm as it became overwhelmed. He jerked the steering wheel and pulled into an abandoned parking lot, his forehead resting heavily against the cold steering wheel as he let the glacial rage race and roar through his body. When he raised his head again, only a clear, determined chill remained in his eyes. The investigation phase is over. Now it's time to act. Liam didn't act immediately. Anger is a bad fuel that will only lead to uncontrolled explosions, while cold determination is the most efficient energy source that can drive sophisticated machinery. He needed more information, more comprehensive surveillance, a more foolproof plan. It's time to use his favorite debt. He dialed another number, and the person on the other end was the communications specialist whose life he had saved on an offshore oil field project in Angola, Leo. On that occasion, Leo was trapped in a control pod that was about to be flooded with seawater after a contractor's mistake caused an underwater pipe to rupture. It was Liam who dove down and dragged him out with a spare set of breathing equipment when everyone was ready to give up. From that day on, Leo said he owed him his life. I need eyes and ears, Liam said as soon as the call was answered. Full coverage, real-time monitoring, remote access. I want to see the movement of every fly in my house. So you're cashing in on that favor you did in Angola? Leo's voice was as calm as ever, with a hint of cynicism. Looks like it's not a small matter. A matter of life and death. Liam only said 4 words. After a brief silence on the other end of the line, Leo replied, Send me the address. Give me 24 hours. I'll give you a God's eye view. Liam used cash to get a room at a motel far from the city. There was a huge table in the room, which became his temporary operational command center. He spread out all the information Marcus had given him on the table and began to draw a complex network of relationships and a timeline. He marks the key nodes of Clara's betrayal, analyzes Vincent's behavioral patterns, and assesses the threat level of each member of his staff. Like a supercomputer, his brain raced through the fragmented information, integrating it into a clear, flawed enemy system. The pattern is clear. Vincent approached Clara with a premeditated plan, not only for her beauty, but also for the perfect window of time when her husband was away for a long period of time and her family was experiencing a change of heart. He's a classic opportunistic predator. The next afternoon, a rhythmic knock on the door interrupted his thoughts, 3 short and 1 long, a sign of their previous agreement on the project. It was Leo, carrying an unassuming bag of electrician's tools and a thick laptop bag. "You look like you just finished wrestling a polar bear." Leo surveyed his bloodshot eyes. "When did you get any sleep?" When they're all down, Liam pointed to the table. "What did you bring?" Leo didn't say more than a few words as he opened his tool bag, but instead of wrenches and screwdrivers, it contained a dazzling array of top-of-the-line surveillance equipment. The latest generation of miniature thermal imaging cameras that can penetrate right through non-load-bearing walls. Directional microphone that filters out ambient noise and accurately captures target conversations. And this, he pulled out a matchbox-sized device, signal interceptor and replicator. Military grade, don't ask me where I got it. Can you mount them without being noticed? Liam asked. It's done. Leo grinned smugly and opened his laptop, a dozen split video windows immediately appearing on the screen. The images are of none other than Liam's home, some normal color, and some infrared images showing the source of body heat. This morning I drove a local telecom company work truck around your house for line maintenance. Cameras have been shot through a high-pressure air gun into a hidden location on the exterior of your home, along with a few disguised as lawn sprinklers. You can see and hear everything in the house now. Liam's gaze voraciously sweeps across every screen as his home, for the moment, becomes a tactical map covered in infrared heat sources. He counted at least 8 hot spots moving around the house. Your house is buzzing right now, boss, Leo said, pointing to the screen. 10 hostile targets, counting the 2 sentries outside. From the way they stood and carried their weapons, they were amateurs, but there were a lot of them and they were dangerous. He saw Clara, moving through the house like a soulless puppet, head down, shoulders hunched. In the kitchen, Zoe is wiping down a wine-soiled table while one of Vincent's henchmen, who is staring at her wistfully, mouths something. Audio's picked up. Leo put on the headphones and tweaked them before handing one to Liam. Want to hear what your guests are talking about? Liam put on his headphones. Slurs and drunken boasting immediately filled his brain. Vincent was sitting in Liam's favorite single armchair, talking in high spirits. That stupid woman thought we were helping her mother heal. Every time she takes out money, I only send a small portion to the hospital, and the rest is enough for our brothers to have a quickie for a while. By the time her idiot husband who digs for oil offshore gets back, we'll have turned this place into our biggest distribution center. How nice and quiet this neighborhood is. The cops couldn't dream of it. What if he comes back for trouble? One of the henchmen asked. Vincent let out a sickening laugh as he patted the gun on his belt. Looking for trouble? Then we'll let his pretty little daughter see with her own eyes how a hero can fall to his knees like a dog. By then, this house, this woman, and this chick will all be ours. The laptop screen made a small crack under Liam's fist with a soft click. Leo silently moved his precious computer a bit toward him. I recognize that look on your face, Leo said softly. It was that look in Angola when you decided to go into the water to save me. What's the plan? I'm going to destroy them. Liam's voice had not the slightest hint of warmth, and each word felt like it had been salvaged from the bottom of a frozen lake. No, Leo shook his head, analyzing with a rationality characteristic of a technician. Death is too cheap and troublesome for them. What you have to do is systematically destroy them. Take away everything they have, strip them of everything they think they have, and let them live in shame and despair. That's what they deserve and the safest way to get revenge. Liam was silent for a long time, then nodded slowly. You're right. I'm going to make them taste pain and regret coming to this world in the smartest, coldest way possible. That's the security director I know, Leo smiled. These surveillance devices are gifts. What else do you need? A few non-lethal but effective tools, a couple of untraceable cell phones. Also, when I move, I need you to be my eyes and ears, monitoring the whole situation and coordinating my actions. No problem. Leo gathers his things and prepares to leave. One more thing. I checked out Shield Construction in passing. They have big names behind them, probably involved with some people on the city council. This may go deeper than you think. No matter how deep, Liam's eyes flashed with a cold light. I'm going to uproot them. Before making his move, Liam decides to see Clara again. It was not to undo it, but to completely cut off the last vestiges of illusions in his own mind. He needed an in-person acknowledgement, a witnessed ceremony, to put the final nail in the coffin of their 15-year marriage. The next afternoon, he changed into a clean pair of overalls and a facecloth shirt, covering up the austere air he had brought with him from the North Sea and making himself look like an ordinary husband who had just returned home from a long, dusty day at work. Instead of driving, he walked the last stretch on foot, giving himself enough time to compress and seal all his emotions into that cold warehouse in the deepest recesses of his heart. He stood in front of his house and rang the doorbell. It was the same burly man who opened the door, cigarette dangling from his mouth, a playful, provocative grin on his face when he saw Liam. And instead of moving out of the way, he turned toward the house and shouted, "Hey, Vincent, your wife's ex-husband is back." There was a roar of laughter from the room. Liam's gaze traveled over the burly man's shoulder to see his once neat and cozy living room, now smoky and littered with bottles and takeout containers on the floor. On his custom-made couch sat a couple of straggling men, and Vincent was sitting large in his favorite single armchair, one arm arrogantly wrapped around Clara. Clara's face turned as white as paper the moment she saw Liam. As if she'd been electrocuted, she jerked free of Vincent's hand and stood up, her eyes averted and her lips mumbling, afraid to look Liam in the eye. "Liam, what are you doing back here? Isn't your shift still open?" "My work is done, so I'm going home." Liam's tone was calm and unruffled as he walked into the house as if he didn't see the hostile stares, his eyes sweeping over everyone in the room as if he were taking inventory of an accident scene. "This is my home, isn't it?" Vincent stood up slowly. He was half a head shorter than Liam, but his deliberately straight chest made him look imposing. He walked over to Clara and roughly swept her into his arms again, and with a gesture of booty showing, he said to Liam, "I'm afraid you're a little behind in your news, my friend. Now, I'm in charge here." "Yes." Liam's eyes finally landed on Clara. Those eyes that were once so full of love were now like two deep, cold pools. "Clara, is this true?" Clara took a deep breath and seemed to make some sort of determination. When she spoke again, the last vestiges of guilt disappeared from her face and were replaced by a broken, acerbic, and spiteful look. "So what if it's true? Liam, take a good look at yourself. You spend most of the year on that damn, cold, iron lump, leaving me with a cold bank card and endless, maddening waiting. What do you know about life? What do you know about passion? You don't even know what color my favorite flower is anymore." She pointed at a smug-looking Vincent, her voice rising an octave, full of self-defensive hysteria. "Vincent gets it. He made me feel alive, not a pathetic oilman's wife who keeps an empty house. He's here every day, and you're always thousands of miles away in the sky." The words were like a poisoned dagger, stabbing Liam in the deepest point of his guilt. He thought he had provided the most solid security for his family with his hard work and high salary, but he didn't realize that in his wife's eyes, he was just an absentee ATM. "So, for the sake of your passion," Liam's voice went cold as well, every word tinged with ice. "You bring this scum into our home? Let our daughter live in fear and humiliation." "Zoe." Clara snorted a laugh that was harsh and unfamiliar. "She needs to learn to adjust to reality. That princess-like life you're giving her isn't even real. She's spoiled by you. Vincent is just teaching her some necessary rules so she knows the world doesn't revolve around her." "Rules?" Liam took a step forward, an invisible, oppressive feeling coalescing from extreme anger and disappointment that brought everyone in the living room to a screeching halt of laughter. Vincent immediately stepped in front of Clara and bumped Liam with what he thought was his strong chest. Hey, hey, calm down, husband. Don't put on your safety director act here. This isn't your rig. Nobody takes orders from you. Clara is my woman now, and this family, soon, will be mine as well. Be smart, take your stuff and get out, and we'll let you leave with honor. Otherwise, Liam looked at him, then smiled. It was a pure, mechanical smile devoid of any human emotion, and it made Vincent's heart grow fuzzy for some reason. You know, Vincent, Liam said slowly, as if he were explaining the safety manual to a new employee, one of the most important lessons in my job is to never underestimate a seemingly peaceful system. Because when it reaches a critical point in its internal pressure, it undergoes a structural failure that takes all the out-of-conformity, redundant parts and crushes them, in the most thorough way possible, into powder. He stopped looking at Vincent and turned his gaze one last time on Clara, a gaze in which the last vestiges of warmth had been extinguished, leaving only the coldness of a judge's pronouncement. You want passion, you want to live authentically. Good, I'll give you what you want. You will experience the most real and biting consequences. As for you, his gaze swept coldly over Vincent and his unknowing henchman. Enjoy your last days in this house. Cherish it. When he finished, he turned away without another glance at anyone. Behind them came the more unrestrained jeering of Vincent and his men, and Clara's shrill cry, Liam, you coward. You get your ass back here. Do you hear me? Liam didn't look back. Coward? They will soon learn just what a man used to taking control and dismantling complex systems can become when pushed to the limit. He'd given her one last chance to admit her mistake and leave her hanging. And she, herself, threw it in the trash and stomped on it a couple times. Back at the motel, he dialed Leo's number. The standoff ended, Liam said. Just as we expected. Clara is completely on their side. She made her choice. Unexpected, Leo's voice came through the receiver. While you were there, I intercepted a call between Vincent and a manager at Shield Construction named Henderson. They're talking about forging a contract for the sale of the house with Clara's signature on it once they've disposed of you, and then forcing Zoe to go to boarding school under the guise of a family dispute. Your home, which they plan to convert into a transit warehouse for contraband in a week. Liam hangs up the phone and looks out the window at the city's million lights. His plan was originally just an eviction and punishment for the intruders. Now, he realizes that he has to do more than just clean up his own house. What he wants to do is to conduct a thorough and systematic safety inspection to remove all the relevant rotten parts from the city, one by one. He pulled out a map of the city and circled his home heavily in red pen. He then began to mark the locations of the cameras, the number of enemies, their patterns of activity, their frequency of communication, possible evacuation routes, and their social networks. His brain raced like a sophisticated computer. The first step to revenge is not violence, but deprivation. He would start by depriving them of their security, their hubris, their sleep. He wants to turn them from smug hunters to straw hunters, waiting in endless fear and suspicion for the judgment of doom to come. The night is deepening, and a silent storm is quietly brewing. 2 a.m. is the time when the city sleeps the deepest and the valley where human alertness is at its lowest. Liam's operation has begun. He put on a pair of dark coveralls without any reflective material and tactical gloves and approached his home as silently as a ghost blending into the night. He doesn't have a single weapon in the traditional sense of the word in his toolkit, just various sizes of wrenches, industrial-grade cable cutters, special screwdrivers, and rolls of high-strength, cut-resistant industrial zip ties. These were his most familiar companions on the rig, the tools used to maintain and dismantle machinery, and tonight, they would be used to dismantle a decaying human system. All external camera feeds have been looped by me, and the images are fixed on an empty street from 5 minutes ago. You have a 5-minute window of safety. Leo's voice came through the miniature bone conduction headphones, clear and calm. Liam circled around to the back of the house. The 2 guards in the yard, who were supposed to be on sentry duty, were drunk and were leaning back in their recliners and letting out heavy snores, the whiskey bottles beside them empty. Amateurs, without even the most basic discipline. Liam didn't even startle them, but walked right up to the main electrical and communications line interface boxes on the side of the house. He skillfully cut the main power cord, but deftly kept a spare line connected to one of the upstairs second bedroom outlets. He then pried open the connector on the comm line and hooked up a Leo-provided signal jammer disguised as a filter. This little device cuts off all outward cell phone signals and Wi-Fi signals. Step 1 complete, he whispered into the miniature microphone. 3, 2, 1. Execute power down. The entire house was instantly plunged into a deep, dark blackness. There was an immediate burst of cursing and panicked footsteps from the house. Damn, what's with the blackout? Is the fuse blown? Someone go check it out. My cell phone is out of service. What about yours? A bulky figure came down the stairs, cursing and holding a cell phone as a flashlight, and walked toward the basement distribution room. Liam had long since snuck into the kitchen through the unlocked back door, hidden like a statue in the shadows on the side of the huge refrigerator. As the man staggered past him, he snapped out like a Cheeto waiting in the dark for a long time. One gloved hand covered the other's mouth with precision, preventing any exclamation of alarm, and the other arm strangled the arterial sinus in his neck like an iron vise, applying just the right amount of pressure. The opponent struggled for less than 3 seconds before he lost consciousness and went limp without making a single superfluous sound. Joey, did you find the problem? Did it trip the breaker? Vincent shouted impatiently from upstairs. Liam taps twice into the microphone, a signal to Leo. In the next second, a brilliant psychological tactic kicked in. The line, which Liam had purposely kept powered, connected to a smart speaker in a vacant guest room next door to Zoe's room. Leo, via remote control, got that speaker to start playing a creepy, ethereal nursery rhyme at maximum volume. What a sound! It's coming from upstairs. Who's there? The eerie music echoed through the dead silence and darkness of the house, instantly pulling everyone's nerves to the breaking point. In the midst of the chaos, another man braved the stairs with a flashlight. He scanned around nervously, the flashlight beam shaking wildly against the wall, exposing his inner fear. Liam slipped out of the shadows behind him in the lower part of the staircase like a ghost and delivered a precise hand chop to the back of his neck where the cervical vertebrae joined, and the other man lurched forward without even a grunt. Panic is starting to spread upstairs like the plague. It's not right. This is definitely not right. Get up, all of you. Vincent's voice had taken on a tremor that he couldn't hide. The door to the master bedroom slammed open, and one of Vincent's cronies, a burly man with a long list of ex-convictions, burst out with a loaded shotgun. Go see the girl. Vincent screamed in the background. It must be her playing tricks. Get her out of there. Liam's blood turned cold instantly. That asshole is walking towards Zoe's room with a gun in his hand. He couldn't wait any longer, couldn't play cat and mouse. Just moments before the gunman is about to slam the butt of his gun through the door to Zoe's room, Liam emerges from the darkness at the other end of the hallway. Instead of attacking directly, he threw a heavy industrial wrench, as hard as he could, at the metal decorations at the other end of the corridor with an ear-splitting, metal-breaking-like thud. The gunman, attracted by the loud noise, turned his gun completely instinctively in the direction of the source of the sound. Just in the nick of time, Liam had rushed to him like an arrow off a string. Instead of grabbing the gun, he grabbed the hot barrel violently with one hand and lifted it upward with all his strength, while a vicious, full-body-weight knee strike struck the opponent squarely in the small of the back. The gunman bent over momentarily in pain, the shotgun in his hand blasting against the ceiling, plaster and dust rustling down in a deafening manner. Liam snatched the weapon in one smooth motion, reversed it, and slammed the hard butt of the gun into his opponent's temple. The man went down like a sack of cement. What the hell? Vincent finally bursts out of the master bedroom, a pistol in his hand, pointing wildly in the darkness. When his eyes finally adjusted to the darkness in the muzzle fire and saw the figure that was like a vengeful demon god and exuded an icy, murderous aura, his pupils violently contracted into 2 pinpoints. You shouldn't be here. Liam didn't give him a chance to finish his sentence. He plucked a high-intensity LED tactical flashlight from his belt and turned it on instantly. The blinding glare of 10,000 lumens shot straight into Vincent's eyes like a bolt of frozen lightning. Liam had bullied his way to the top the moment Vincent let out a scream of anguish from his instant blindness. He moved as fast as lightning, and with a clean grab for the gun, he grabbed Vincent's wrist and flipped and twisted it outward, and the pistol came out of his hand, scattering parts and bullets all over the place. This was followed by an unrelenting elbow strike, using the full kinetic energy of centrifugal force that caught him squarely in the jaw. Like a puppet with broken strings, Vincent fell backward heavily to the ground, his teeth splattering out of his gaping mouth along with blood. Cleaned up, Liam reported into the microphone in a low voice. He found out the pre-prepared industrial ties and tied all the defenseless intruders, one by one, with their arms and legs crossed, firmly behind their backs, as if they were dealing with a pile of discarded industrial garbage. He walked up to the door of Zoe's room, eased his footsteps, and knocked in as gentle a voice as he could muster. "Zoe, it's me, Dad. It's safe now." The door slowly opened a crack and Zoe's tear-stained, terrified little face was revealed. When she saw that it was indeed Liam, she couldn't contain herself any longer and threw herself into his arms, letting out a sob. Liam held her tightly, feeling the violent trembling of his daughter's body. The iceberg in his heart, constructed by anger and hatred, finally showed a hint of melting, turning into endless aftermath and heartache. "It's okay, baby. I'm home. They can't hurt you anymore. I knew you'd come back." Zoe choked in his arms, her voice breaking. "Go pack a backpack," Liam's voice resumed with determination. "And you're going to stay at Aunt Sarah's tonight. You don't need to see what happens next." After settling her daughter and seeing off the trusty policewoman Marcus had sent to pick her up, Liam returned to the wretched living room. Vincent and the others had woken up one by one and were trying in vain to free their hands from the ties. Clara came out of the master bedroom, apparently awakened by the sound of gunshots and screams. Disbelief and fear were written all over her face when she saw the sight before her, her untouchable lover lying on the ground like a dead dog, his men tied up in knots. Liam pulled over a chair and sat in front of Vincent. Now, Liam's voice was frighteningly calm, as if he were conducting a post-accident safety questioning. "Let's talk about consequences." Liam didn't do anything physical to Vincent. He knew that for such leaders, who relied on bravado and superficial toughness to control their men, destroying their dignity and status would be far more painful than breaking their bones. "Leo, start the video. Multiple angles, high definition." Liam gave instructions into the microphone. He walked up to the group of punks tied up in a row, holding a scraper he had found in the kitchen and used to scale fish. "You guys think it's funny to make my daughter, don't you? You guys think that it's fulfilling to use my home as your dumping ground." He didn't raise his volume, but each word pierced their ears like an ice pick. He didn't use electric push clippers. That would have been too kind. With that scraper, he scraped the word, "coward," carefully, stroke by stroke, across the first man's face. There was no blood, but the red marks and the accompanying sense of humiliation caused the man to let out a suppressed whimper. "No, please, stop it." The others began to panic and beg for mercy. Liam turned a deaf ear. He turned to the next one and scratched "thief" on his forehead. Like a cold artist, he left on the faces and arms of these tough guys a variety of humiliating words representing their crimes. Once that was done, he pulled a few things out of a package Leo had prepared ahead of time, a couple of adult-sized onesie pajamas with a funny banana print and a couple of brightly colored lipsticks. "Put it on." Liam threw his pajamas in front of them. "You can't. It's worse than killing us." A man cried out in humiliation. "I can." The look in Liam's eyes left them in no doubt that any resistance would only invite more immediate and painful physical consequences. Under silent but deadly threat, each of these men, who had been untouchable just moments before, were forced to contort their bodies in front of the camera, dressed in those comically absurd baby pajamas. The tight fabric made them look like strings of deformed, hairy giant babies. Liam himself stepped up and drew clownish, exaggerated grins on each of their faces, using lipstick. "Now, clean up." Liam pointed to the mess all over the floor. "And tongue every corner you've soiled. I want to see your sincerity." Faithfully recorded by high-definition cameras, these tough guys began the darkest, most humiliating hour of their lives. They were on their knees, sticking out their tongues like dogs, cleaning up wine stains and food scraps from the floor. They also praise each other's labor and how charming their clown makeup is. Their boss, Vincent, is tied to a chair and forced to watch from the best possible viewpoint as he directs a tragedy that ends up starring one of his own. His empire, instead of being destroyed in a hail of bullets, was reduced to a complete laughingstock in a fit of suppressed sobbing and comical banana pajamas. Liam emailed the hour-long, performance art-worthy video, encrypted, to Marcus. Marcus accidentally leaked the video, anonymously, to all the gangs and underlings in town that they do business with, as well as their competitors. I'm going to make them die a complete social death in their own circles and never be able to raise their heads. With that done, Liam finally walked up to Clara, who had been frozen in place like a wooden statue from start to finish. She witnessed the whole thing, her face dead and her body shaking violently with fear. Liam, I was wrong. She finally squeezed out. Shut up. Liam interrupted her coldly. He no longer wanted to hear any more arguments. He pulled a thick stack of papers from his jacket pocket and tossed them on the coffee table in front of her like trash. It was all the evidence Marcus had found of how Vincent had transferred her mother's life-saving money into his own bank account to gamble and spend. Recorded conversations between him and a manager named Henderson at Shield Construction, discussing in detail how he was going to take over the property, and even intimate photographs of Vincent and another one of his mistresses. Is this what you call passion? Liam pointed to the cold, irrefutable documents. A professional liar who played you like an ATM and a fool, squeezed every last penny out of you, and planned to sell you along with your house? For him, you betrayed your husband, sold out your daughter, and personally destroyed our home of 15 years. Clara looked at the evidence, and each page was like a hammer blow, shattering the last of her self-hypnosis and illusions. Her body went completely limp, and she finally let out a desperate, beastly howl. I don't know, I really don't know. He told me that Mom needs more money for her treatments, and that experimental drugs are very expensive, and I'm just so scared of losing my mom. Fear is not a license to sell your soul. Liam's voice held no sympathy, only the coldness of a final judgment. It was your own vanity, stupidity, and selfishness that made you make the choices that brought you to this point. You're the one who opened the door and led the wolf into the house. He stopped paying attention to her wailing and dialed Marcus' number. Marcus, it's okay to bring people in. I've got a bunch of trespassers here and a well-documented case of massive commercial fraud. By the way, they resisted arrest and had a violent infighting. A few minutes later, the sound of sirens came from far away. When the heavily armed policemen burst into the house, they were met with a surrealistic sight that they would never forget. A couple of burly men in banana baby pajamas and clown makeup crying and accusing each other. Their boss, tied to a chair in a state of mental collapse, and the mistress of the house sitting in disarray next to a pile of scattered papers, like a soulless shell. It looks like there was a fierce struggle at the scene. Marcus gave a wink to his subordinate at his side and said in all seriousness, "Yes, officer," Liam replied calmly. They got into a fight over a share of the spoils. Before Vincent is dragged away by the police like a dead dog, Liam walks up to him and, in a voice only the two of them can hear, whispers, "In prison, think about it. If you dare hide anything from the police or presume to seek revenge on anyone, remember, tonight's video is just a trailer. I'll make sure it appears on every website you can imagine, complete with your name and address. I'll make you in there live harder than you die." In Vincent's eyes, that last bit of ferocity went out, leaving only pure, bone-deep fear. Over the next few weeks, a silent storm swept through the seemingly peaceful city. Vincent completely collapsed. Under the threat of Marcus' special attention and the humiliating video, he spilled everything during the interrogation like beans in the water in exchange for a possible reduction in his sentence. Not only did he confess to all of his crimes, but he also voluntarily gave full details of his collusion with Shield Construction in order to obtain credit for them, including every move he made to intimidate them and force them to relocate, as well as the payoffs and the scheme for sharing the loot that manager Henderson had promised him. Marcus uses these leads to join forces with the State Bureau of Investigation and follow the trail to a lightning strike. Manager Henderson was arrested in his office, and from his computer, investigators found more evidence of improper financial transactions between Shield Construction and certain city council officials. A network of corruption hidden beneath the city's glittering facade is finally uprooted by a small corner pried open by Liam. Several local officials and executives of Shield Construction fell into disgrace, and the company's stock price plummeted, eventually declaring bankruptcy and liquidation. The video, dubbed the Banana Pajama Cleaning Team, went viral in the city's underground world and became the biggest joke of the year. Vincent and his men, even if they are lucky enough to get out of prison, will never be able to get a foothold in their own circles, their reputation and male dignity completely destroyed by Liam in an almost artistic way. Liam's revenge is clean, sharp, and perfectly navigated on the edge of the law. He didn't personally inflict any violence that would have warranted a heavy sentence, but used his expert mind as a security director risk assessment, systems analysis, and psychological attack to make all his enemies pay the price with the utmost pain and precision. The divorce proceedings went exceptionally well. In the face of mountains of irrefutable evidence, Clara's attorney even advises her to abandon any unrealistic illusions. Not only did she lose ownership of the house and any right to property division, but she also faced multiple charges for her subordination and assistance in the overall business fraud case. Ultimately, the court sentenced Liam to 2,000 hours of community service after she indicated through her attorney that she did not wish to pursue the matter any further. Most importantly, the court awarded full custody of Zoe, uncontested, to Liam based on her behavior of placing her minor daughter in an extremely dangerous situation. Liam sold the house that held so many painful memories as fast as he could. He used that money, along with savings recovered by the police from Vincent and belonging to him, to set up a trust fund for Clara's mother, enough to pay for all of her subsequent medical treatments and care for the rest of her life. It was his last duty to the failed marriage, and his last and only respect for the old man he had once sincerely called Mom. After doing that, he blacked out all of Clara's contacts. From then on, this woman was in his world, completely vaporized. 6 months later, a sunny weekend afternoon, Liam takes Zoe and shows up in a brand new neighborhood on the other side of town. It's tree-lined, with wide streets, far from the gloom of the past, and the smell of grass and new life is in the air. Their new home is a smaller, but more cozy, modern-style bungalow with a tiny garden in the backyard, where Liam is clumsily learning how to grow Zoe's favorite sunflowers. "Dad, are you really not going to sail anymore?" Zoe asked, tilting her face as she helped him water the yard at his new home. Her face had rebloomed with the bright smile that a 16-year-old girl should have. That nightmarish experience had left scars, but under Liam's attentive companionship and professional psychological counseling, it was slowly healing into the armor of her growth. Liam put down the kettle and rubbed his daughter's hair, a long overdue, heartfelt smile on his face. "Can't. I changed jobs, onshore, in the safety consulting department of an engineering firm. In the future, I'll be able to come home every day. I'll be able to attend every one of your parent-teacher conferences, and I'll be able to hand you a cup of hot cocoa while you look at the stars through your telescope at night." He looked into his daughter's eyes, which had become clear and bright again, and knew he had made the best choice in the world. Instead of being consumed by hatred, he transformed that glacial strength into an impenetrable dam that guarded his family. He is still the same strict, calm director of security, but now he is guarding the most important, the only core asset in his life. As for Clara, her name became an unspoken taboo between them. Liam occasionally hears bits and pieces about her from Marcus. She was ultimately given an enhanced punishment for her poor behavior and repeated confrontations during her community service. With no more money, no more beauty to add to the mix, and no more men to cling to, her whining and hysteria, which had served her so well in Liam's presence, was worthless in the face of cold reality. It is said that she eventually moved to the most chaotic and cheapest neighborhood in town because she couldn't afford the rent, making ends meet by working as a night janitor at a 24-hour fast food restaurant. One day, Liam drives Zoe into town to see a newly released sci-fi movie. While waiting at a red light, he inadvertently glanced out the window. At the bus stop on the opposite corner, a hunched woman in a cheap raincoat was keeping her head down, avoiding the eyes of pedestrians. Her hair was yellow, her face haggard, her eyes numb and tired. Even across the street and through a layer of car windows, Liam recognized her instantly. "It's Clara." She seemed to detect the gaze and lifted her head, looking this way in bewilderment. Her eyes swept over Liam's car, but didn't linger, just slid past in a hollow, indifferent manner. She no longer recognized him, or rather, she had lost the ability to recognize happiness. The green light came on, Liam stepped on the gas, and the car drove smoothly forward, leaving the downtrodden figure, forever, in the rearview mirror. He didn't look back, and there were no waves in his mind. He knew that the best revenge was not a vocal destruction, but a silent, complete, clean removal of the other person from his world. Then, in the sunshine, live a better, happier, more meaningful life than ever before. In his world, there is only the future, only the new horizon of growing old and new with his daughter. That's the end of today's story. For more captivating tales, hit subscribe and never miss an episode.